Dismas Mokua is a political risk analyst. He joins us now in the Situation Room. Happy Easter, Dismas.
Happy Easter.
Karibu sana to the hot seat.
Thank you. You know, when I got the invitation, I got a bit nervous. So I've had to do a number of press-ups and take lots of coffee. Because the personalities I've seen taking this seat are extremely powerful. So I'm putting on very big shoes. But I hope I'll survive.
Dismas, I'm meeting you for the first time, but I like the way you deal with your stress. You increase it. Coffee doesn't reduce stress.
Kisi Blue Mountain Coffee does reduce stress.
Kisi who? Which that? Which
Kisi
what?
Blue Mountain Coffee.
There's something called Kisi Blue Mountain Coffee.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
See?
It's a stress reliever.
Yes.
Yeah, and where is it found?
It works miracles. It's an exclusive product. Probably that's why you don't know about it.
So
Exclusive
do you
to
drink
Dismas.
it? Do you sniff it? Do you smoke it? How do you go about
You drink it?
with hot water
Yes.
or cold water?
Hot water.
This Kisi Blue Mountain Coffee, Dismas.
And no milk.
Is it
Is
berries
it
or
available in the
leaves?
shops?
No. Custom.
Do you have access to it?
Yes.
You have become my immediate best friend.
This is
Kuna uwezekano unaweza pata
This is
hiyo kahawa.
kahawa ya Dismas hii anaita ya Kisii, si ile ya nini berries. Ni majani.
Ni majani ile ambayo inapitishwa ukipita Hispania, ukizunguka ukikuja huku kwa Pro Box
Inakuja in rolls. Inakuja in rolls.
Hapana kabisa, hapana.
Okay, Dismas. A lot is happening in the country. You're a political risk analyst. What's that though? What is a political risk analyst?
I'm glad about the question because the majority of people do not seem to understand what a political risk analyst does. You've got many people who want to do business in Kenya, but before they settle in, they like to understand the political situation. They'd like to know the key players. They'd like to know any risk associated with FDI. So they want to sit back and say, if I'm going to invest in Kenya,
What is FDI?
foreign direct investment. Yes. Yeah. So they want to know if I'm going to invest in Kenya, what information do I need for control and decision making? For instance, you know, you may be surprised that they may not be knowing that Kenya is a presidential system, that we have got governors, that we have got MCS. So they want to get this information to give them capacity to take a decision in simple terms.
Okay. So they want to understand the policies of government. They want to understand the legislative framework. They want to understand all those things.
Yes.
And they also want to understand how much, whether it's now here it's 10% or 15%, kitu kidogo.
Yeah, like
to
for
invest.
instance, what happened with I don't know whether he was requested to leave Kenya or he was deported, the Rubis CEO. Now that's part of political risk analysis, because an investor would like to know that if I'm putting money in Kenya and I send my staffers, top talents, are they going to be requested to take a walk in the middle of the night, or it is going to be administrative justice that you'll be called upon to explain certain positions? So that's very critical. And in my view, because now we operate in a globalization of trade, of markets, of production, so you can't afford to do a number of things in Kenya, hoping that they will not affect the entire world. Because I suspect this gentleman has become the topic of conversation in France. So the Frenchmen are asking themselves, what is the backstory? What really happened? Were you called upon to explain the decisions you've taken? Were you given feedback, or somebody just knocked at your door and you're told, excuse me, sir, monsieur, those French names are difficult to pronounce. Let's take a walk. We are on our way to JKI using the expressway.
Jean-Christian.
Yes.
So, you know, interesting that you bring that, because let's start on that note. All right. So here is a company that has come and invested in the country. It has come and bought out existing companies and then says, let's roll out. It's not just in Kenya, it's also in the region. And it's operating as a major player in the oil sector. We see the crisis unfolding, and then it gets to a point where this particular company is fingered, their CEO is fingered, and there's a whole deportation. There's a backstory that has been reported here. A stormy meeting on Wednesday between government officials and oil executives on the raging fuel crisis triggered dramatic events that would culminate in the deportation of Rubis Energy Kenya MD Jean-Christian Bergeron. The previous day, Interior CS Fred Matiang'i had spoken to French Ambassador to Kenya, Alain Coste-Ménager, on the government's concerns over the activities of Rubis and the punitive action it planned to take. So the ambassador had already been informed, this is what we have, this is what we want to do. This was yet another attempt to reach a compromise, as negotiations between marketers and the Energy Ministry officials on Monday were not making headway, with Kenyan officials accusing Rubis of frustrating the talks with unreasonable demands. Rubis, an independent French firm which operates in Europe, the Caribbean and Africa, is being blamed by the government for fueling the shortage, given that it has a huge share of the local market. A source familiar with the discussion said Rubis presented the government with two options. One, be allowed to sell the fuel at the prevailing market price, that's of 175 a litre, or the government increases compensation under the fuel subsidy program, which would mean it tops up the difference, 41, to cushion the consumers and maintain the price at 134. But the government said this was unfair, arguing that Rubis was seeking to reap more profit despite holding stock. So this is being reported as some of the conversations that were taking place in this meeting that ended up with then the government announcing, you know what, the MD, we have revoked the work permit and therefore the person is persona non grata in this country. The question though, should there have been, like you're saying, fair administrative justice? If the person is flouting Kenyan laws, is the best route to spirit them out of the country? Or would the best route be to subject them through the Kenyan law?
Well, I'm not sure whether we have sufficient information to form opinions or establish perspectives around that story. I suspect the information is coming from one side.
Yep.
And every kind of this story always has got two sides of the story. But the fundamental question to ask ourselves, number one, when you're talking about Rubis, what is their history at a global level? Do their CEOs engage in mischief? And is part of, say, unfair trade practices, part of their culture, part of their business philosophy, number one. Number two, what is the percentage share of their market such that an action by Rubis can influence the entire space? Because I suspect it's less than 10%. Reports would indicate it's about 9%. Now, if Rubis, say, was a monopoly, or maybe the market share is 50%, 70%.
If Rubis was Kenya Power.
Yeah, substantial. Then you would say that a decision taken by the CEO of Rubis would actually impact the entire sector. But if it's less than 10%, you've got another 90% with other players. And then, is this information public? I mean, we need to get the side from the Rubis side and from the government side, because, you know, Kenyans are people generally imagine that Kenyans have no capacity to take decisions. But when given information, they can form an opinion.
Yep.
And in my view, all these pieces of legislation, they've got penalties. It could be a pecuniary penalty that the company is fined a certain amount of money, or the CEO, or you are taken through a legal process, and you know those show cause letters and everything else, before you just deport a human being as if it's a bag of potatoes or maize from Nyandarua. People need to be treated with respect. And that is not limited to, expatriate CEOs, also the Kenyan CEOs. Every human being needs to be given an opportunity to present their case. So in my view, what they ought to have done is, lay the accusations, give him a chance to respond, and meanwhile, work with these other persons who are compliant, or even tell members of the public that in the interim, do not go to Rubis. Yeah, in my view, that would...
if you want to withdraw their license, withdraw the license, because that's what it would mean.
Yeah,
if you're telling the public in the interim, do not go to Rubis, it's basically saying, we had licensed this organization, we have withdrawn the license.
Yeah, I realize even with that...
And there has to be procedure to be followed.
Yeah.
Laid out in law.
Yeah, I realize even for some medical facilities, when they're not doing the right thing, the relevant agencies would actually go close the place. Then you're given notice, you're told you've been given 7 days or 21 days to reestablish, ensure that you are aligned with the expected procedures.
Yep.
But in my view, just speaking as CEO like that and throwing him out of the nation, it doesn't work well for our brand. And this is not, we are talking about France, which has got a lot of influence at a global level. You can be sure these are topic of conversation in international media. All the Financial Times, Bloomberg, Reuters, all of them are reporting this story. And then the following day, you allocate resources to Brand Kenya, telling them to go and market Kenya, saying that that is a regional hub.
Come and invest.
Yeah, come and invest, come and do all this business. Because people would be saying, if a CEO of a global multinational is treated in this manner, what would happen to an ordinary Mora or Wanjiro? How will they be treated? Because, this CEO seems to have a one-on-one relationship with the ambassador. Is for all intents, is a member of the high society. But they're just told it was nice doing business. What happens to a normal businessman? And now what happens to Mora in this case in Kenya?
There are those who argue that actually the market share that Rubis enjoys is twice what you suggested, 20, not even 9. But of significance, everything else that you've said holds true, because how is it then that even if you control, say, 20% of the market share, how then would you destabilize? Because there's the other 80.
The balance, 80.
Yes. How would you? The converse would be true. If you control the 80%, then definitely you can actually sabotage the entire industry.
And then there would be an issue of concern. Then why would you allow one organization, this multinational, to control 80%?
If you look at the discussions that have taken place regarding this, one thing that is certain is that by the time you get to the point of a national of another country being deported, as you correctly put it, there's a lot more that has gone on that we do not know.
Absolutely.
A great deal more. And we may never know, and we may never be told. Because it isn't every day that the national of a friendly country gets deported from Kenya. It is something that doesn't happen very, very often.
It's a rare occurrence.
Yes, but then also, why don't we go back to the discussion that has been here for the longest time about the shortage, which never was. Because there was a fuel crisis, yes, at the pumps. But was there fuel in the country? Yes, there was fuel in the country. So, what is it that was causing the shortage?
Well, the relevant agencies, KPC said they've got enough stocks to last us for a long time.
They said 3 weeks to be specific.
Yeah, 3 weeks.
Yes.
And in my view, it's about the market control. Because we are told that in a liberalized economy, we are supposed to let the market forces determine.
Our economy is not liberalized.
That's what we are told. And then there's this subsidy. And I've spoken to a number of the private sector operators who obviously don't want to be named. And their view is that they were being forced to finance the government. That their position is that there is a cash flow crisis, and the government wants the private sector to use private resources to finance their operations. And the subsidy, there are many views about the subsidy, but my understanding is a subsidy would not work in this kind of an environment. Because on one hand, there is a heavy taxation on the oil products, very heavy taxation. And then on the other hand, you're offering a subsidy. So subsidy, I think for me, and in context, is some sort of voodoo thinking. Because what they ought to do, and in my view, there is a need to have a deliberate strategy on taxation in the energy sector or in the fuel sector, so that you reduce the tax component maybe by 30%, whatever it is, and then you subject the sector to the forces of demand and supply. Of course, there's a regulator to ensure that there is no mischievous capitalism taking place. But when you have capacity, you've got petroleum products in our stores that are even available at the petrol stations, but the owners are not willing to sell simply because of price.
Yep.
Even last night when all these announcements were made, for about 6 hours, there was everybody said there were no products in the gas station. But as soon as it's after midnight, then all of a sudden, you're being told, kuja mnunue mafuta sasa imerudi.
It's a whole game. Well, there are people who argue and say the oil marketing companies, as we got closer and closer to the 14th, they knew what was going to happen, okay? And the advantage that would bring to them. But at the same time, the oil marketing companies have argued, same thing privately, that, look, as we sell at the pump, our money is not there. It's basically you've been given bread by Toasty. to sell at your kiosk, but the profit that you're supposed to make will come from Toasty, right? So you're basically selling at cost, you're making nothing, but your margin will come from a third party. So if that third party does not give you the margin, then you're wondering, so what am I doing? I still have to pay rent here. I have to pay for electricity. I've got to run my operations. So you don't have operating capital. Big issues. Why were there delays in the advancement of the price stabilization money?
For me, it's an issue of cash flow because I did accounting. So if there's a predictability that if I sell my product today, the government is going to make
In 30 days,
4 weeks. If they stick with 4 weeks, then the local players as well as the multinationals can plan their cash flows knowing that within 4 weeks, I'm going to get a certain amount of money.
Yep.
You can even go to your bankers because they've seen your statements, they've seen your cash flows. They can give you facilities because they know within 4 weeks, there's resources coming in. But if it goes beyond 4 weeks, it goes to 8 weeks, then it goes to 12 weeks, it goes to 18 weeks, it goes to, several months, then that is a crisis. And in my view, when you see people, even commercial banks, not taking the word of these oil marketing companies, it means they're losing confidence. They have no faith in the government's word. And when you were growing up, you were told that you can take the government's word to the bank. But this time round, it seems nobody is taking the government's word to the bank.
Yep.
And in my view, we must run away from this thing called subsidies and reduce the tax components of the petroleum and petroleum products. That will be the long-term solution. There are even some folks that you speak with, they say there's a few public servants of rank who are beneficiaries of these bureaucracy. They tell you that we are supposed to give you a check of this amount. If you speak nicely or you smile, we'll give you the check today. But if you give us a stone face, then it's going to take another week. So these are things that maybe need to be addressed. There's no evidence that you can present to confirm what I've said. But those are the conversations from some of the oil marketing companies. But in my view, what we must do is have that predictability from the government that if there's going to be movement within 4 weeks, let it be 4 weeks for cash flow planning, for cash flow management.
Yep. The CS for Energy, who's acting CS for Petroleum and Mining, Ambassador Dr. Monica Juma, spoke yesterday. And she was also speaking tough, saying, look, we've got stock in the country. Look, we've got regulations in the country. We have enough product. We have had several meetings. No, the relevant authorities, including Pipeline, IPRA, the Petroleum PS, have had meetings with the oil marketing companies. I have also been engaged in these meetings with these oil marketing companies, and I come to submit to you, the general public as Kenyans, that these guys are being unreasonable. We have given them a firm commitment that the government will honor its pledge to give them money. And they are being unreasonable. They are not listening to that. I mean, I sat back and I asked myself, okay, so CS, you're not saying that you have paid them. You are not saying that we are clearing the backlog within the next, after signing of the supplementary budget, so within the next X number of days, this will have been sorted. Is still talking about a firm commitment. And it sounded like now we're at a point where we are saying that the word firm commitment is not a firm commitment. It means nothing. It's like when we were told title deeds are pieces of paper.
Well, I understand sausage production is a nightmare. People don't want to see the sausage being produced. Now, for the Kenyan taxpayer, for Murao, Wanjiku, and Afula, they don't want...
This is the Situation Room.
City.
You've mentioned a word repeatedly, and that word is subsidy. And the language has always been that the government offers a fuel subsidy. Okay? How many taxes do we have lumped onto our fuel price?
Well, maybe let's go to the beginning.
Yes.
In my view, and I've seen with the Kenyan Constitution, Article 238 speaks about national security, national interests, threats to our security, all those kind of things. Anything done by anybody, internal or external, which is a threat to our national security, must be evaluated. When you've got an energy crisis that is a threat to our national security, is a threat to prosperity. Now, when you talk about taxation and levies, I think it's about 13. Now, when they do the build-up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way to 13, it becomes very heavy. Almost 50% of what you pay at the pump price is tax. And then they tell you that we love you so much, we are going to give you a subsidy. So you increase the taxation components, and then you offer a subsidy. In very serious economies...
Where is a subsidy offered? Because what I am actually getting to is you add the tax. You have a petroleum development levy. Is that not so?
Yes. There are a million.
Yes, I'm talking about just 3. You have a fuel adulteration levy. You have a road maintenance levy. Okay, now tell me, with all these levies, it means whether indirectly and directly you are going to pay. Actually, this is one of those things where everybody pays. Everyone. You may think that you need to own a vehicle, you know full well you don't. So long as whatever you have has somewhere in its mixed fuel being used, you will have that cost that the individual who is manufacturing it passed on to you. At the end of the day, you, the consumer, you will pay for it. So I have a beef with this word. So how does it become a subsidy? And I've already paid for it.
Now, this subsidy is supposed to be offered where there is no tax component.
Thank you.
It's supposed to be offered where there is no tax component.
So you can see the government participation you can see and it's direct.
Yeah.
In this one, I'm saying, where is it when you've already paid for it?
It's a direct tax.
Yeah, let's use a good example. This phone, if it's supposed to go for 1,000 bob, and then you have the tax component is a 10,000, so it's supposed now to go for 11,000. Then you tell me I love you so much, I'm going to give you a subsidy. I'm going to remove 500 bob
from the tax.
Now that is voodoo logic.
You asked how many levies. Are your fingers ready? Funga, kunja kidole. And this is from the latest from IPRA, okay? Excise duty.
1.
Kidole moja. Road maintenance levy.
Mbili.
Petroleum development levy.
3.
Petroleum regulatory levy.
4.
Railway development levy.
5.
Anti-adulteration levy.
6.
Merchant shipping levy.
7.
Import declaration fee.
8.
Value added tax.
9.
Those are the levies that you find in fuel. So as fuel now goes to 144 and 62 cents, 61 shillings and 34 cents of that is taxes and levies.
Repeat that again so that I understand it.
Mafuta,
as fuel goes to 144.
Mafuta from midnight is 144 bob. Okay? And 62 cents in Nairobi. So for super petrol. That, out of all that, 61 shillings and 34 cents is taxes and levies.
Now, what is even painful or harmful, that this tax, most of the time, is not used in the interest of morale. The president himself, times above numbers, indicated that out of that 61, 2 billion is lost every day. It disappears somewhere into a hole that nobody in Kenya has got capacity to see. It's very easy to come, therefore, to the conclusion that we have got a monetary crisis in Kenya and a fiscal crisis in Kenya. That the economic leadership in Kenya is having very serious challenges. Because why keep on increasing that tax component on one hand when you're making your budget statements and then tell Kenyans that we are losing 2 billion out of this 61 every single day? What are we supposed to do? Say Hail Mary or lie prostrate and cry?
Both.
That is, of course, they ask you to take your pick on what you think may suit your purposes. It may not necessarily help you, but at least you have a choice to pick.
Now, City Muga, in other countries, Nordic countries, tax component is extremely high, about 60%. But you see it. In Kenya, you pay very high taxes, but you have to pay for garbage collection, you have to pay for estate security, you have to pay for everything.
You subsidize the government.
Yes. So actually, the private sector gives, you pay direct taxes or indirect, and then on top of that, you
offer the service.
You offer the service. So it becomes very painful. For people who've been to those Nordic countries, they're the ones who say Hail Mary, because after paying taxes, you are sure that...
You sit pretty.
Yeah, if you go hiking on top of a certain mountain and you got a fracture, you miss a step, you will see 3 helicopters with paramedics coming to see you. because they value life. In Kenya, what happens? You find bodies in River Yala. Those are the critical issues that people need to be
In Kenya,
asking themselves.
you go digging some mine somewhere.
Some place in Siaya.
It collapses and buries you. You unbury yourself.
The governor comes and does a news conference, says tunaomba serikali, and
The governor is a
yeye mwenyewe ni serikali
Kali.
huko na anasema tunaomba serikali, and then the serikali says we've got these rescue equipment in Nairobi. We are looking for a trailer to move them from Nairobi by road all the way to Siaya.
You know
And then you're paying taxes.
Of course.
that is why I asked the question when we're having a conversation about a crisis. There was no crisis. You're talking about subsidy. No such thing. Because a subsidy by definition has to be something that is given by a government.
When there's no tax components.
Yes. And it is given to industry or business to help them thrive. Given. You are giving what we've paid you. And then you're telling us you are the one who is subsidizing. Therein, I think, is where the fault lines that I was talking about begin for me. Secondly, we understand from reports that we read, the import of fuel in this country on a monthly basis is in the 35 upward percentile billion Kenya shillings every month, somewhere thereabouts. So, the tax component that the government reaps from it instantly, that is not difficult to compute. These other things that you keep talking about, where does this money go, for heaven's sake? Because the moment, if you list these 9 fuel levies, they are meant to go to specific areas. Is that not so?
Yes.
The only one that I have seen are these big board
road maintenance,
this road here, it's been maintained by this money you've been paying us as you feel and as you're driving. So be knowing. Better than I've gotten. The other 8?
Well, the petroleum development levy is this one, for example, that is now coming into cushion. When you talk about the price stabilization mechanism, that is part of it. This 5 shillings, let me tell you how much it is this time.
But no, the question is...
Ngoja. Petroleum development levy for the next 1 month is 5 shillings and 40 cents. It's been the same, all right? So it's 5 shillings and 40 cents. So this 5 shillings and 40 cents goes into this particular kitty. And now what are you talking about? How much is the price stabilization mechanism going to be? Some 14 shillings and 53 cents.
Well, you know, Erica, you've raised so many issues which goes to the core of leadership in Kenya. Do we have a leadership crisis in Kenya? Or are the people we elected into office abandoned their mandate? Or probably they don't even know what they're supposed to be
You are
doing?
now defining a crisis.
Yeah.
Because their roles are distinct, clear, and easy to understand. And if those roles are not being actioned, then clearly we have a crisis, don't we?
Yes. Let's look at it at a global level. You've got an energy crisis, fuel crisis. You've got a food crisis. You've got a SIM card crisis. You've got a milk crisis. So there's a crisis everywhere where you turn. You indicated that today, under normal circumstances, people would be going to their villages to see their old folks. Now they cannot. Why? Simply because there's a crisis somewhere. So now we need to ask ourselves, is this man-made crisis? And who are the principal beneficiaries of this crisis? Because, you know, in every crisis, there's somebody somewhere who is a beneficiary. And, you know, because we're in the political space, you've had many terminologies being introduced. There are state capture, you've heard about economic terrorism. So we need to ask ourselves, really, when Mora gives you power to lead, does she not have valid expectations that you have planners within the Ministry of Energy or Mining who are supposed to have a global understanding of issues? You know, right now we have been told, the crisis in Kenya is because of Ukraine.
But we do have people who understand those things very well. The thing about
But,
the
do we
human
see that-
resource, we have human resource.
Do we see the results in the scoreboard?
Nope.
How come?
I thought you were here to tell us such things.
Yeah, so I said, you know, when Mora gives you responsibility, they just want to see results. They want to see the scoreboard. So you cannot come as a public servant of rank to come and describe the problem for us. All Kenyans, they can describe the problem, they can describe the solution. What they want is execution. Because you have delegated this authority to you, Article 1, we line up early in the morning to go and vote, rain or shine. We give you power for 5 years, and we expect results. we don't want anybody describing the problem or describing a solution.
Okay, but then, in fairness, is there likelihood or is there justification for things happening, things getting out of hand, things getting out of control for one reason or the other?
Yeah, things can
That
go
would
out of
lead
hand.
to this situation. And then it's also important to come in and say, you know why, we're here because of this and the other. And this is the steps that we are taking to mitigate what. Because as much as Mora, like you say, wants to eat the sausage, she also would like to understand, I was expecting my sausage at 7 a.m. Why is it coming at 9? Now you could explain, oh, the pig refused to die, whatever.
Completely. That machine ran out of fuel.
You know, you have to explain. I mean, why? First of all, why is there a delay? And 2, what are you doing about the delay? And 3, what are you doing to make sure that tomorrow you come back to 7 a.m. supply of
But Eric, you're
sausage?
No, that is, you just described what leadership is all about. But this fuel crisis, we've had it for
2 into 3 weeks now.
Yeah. Food insecurity from independence. Housing insecurity from independence. And nobody's giving us concrete steps of what is supposed to be done.
Actually, when you talk about aspects of leadership, you are talking about something actually that falls in the realm of myths. Because if you listen to our leaders, they talk exactly like us. When we are busy talking and whining and pining, leaders come and then they do the same thing. So you know you're at a loss. You're wondering, goodness. So how are we supposed to? When they really try, they tell you the obvious.
Okay, City Muga.
Yes, we have this problem, and we say we know we have this problem. So
You know, City Muga, when I was in Strathmore School,
yes,
business school, I was told by my professors that a leader is somebody who paints a picture of where, in this case, where Kenya is supposed
that's
to go.
what Strathmore told you.
Yeah, in the next 5 years, in the next 10
That's
years.
a Strathmore here in Kenya.
Yeah, in Kenya.
And they did not give you an example of what leadership means in this country.
No, I'm coming to that now because they gave examples. So they paint a global picture of where Kenya is supposed to be going. Then they align financial resources and human resources, literally referred to as human capital, to achieve those objectives. So that it benefits the citizens. So the citizen has got a very specific role. All Kenyans are playing their roles, but the leaders, are they playing their roles? That's why you've had all those
Actually,
very
they
serious
are.
conversations.
They are. They complain with us. They come and sit on that very seat you're saying.
So what is the difference between them and...
We elected them. That's the difference.
Now, City has opened a Pandora's box. Right now, we are undergoing through the nominations where we are going to elect 1,930 officials to run Kenya. Now, these people, do they represent our interests
Yes.
by ensuring that we don't have
No, by
food insecurity?
by telling us that they represent our interests. Because that's what they all tell us. And they all tell us the same thing. Yes.
In my view, the way you've indicated that now we need to look at solutions, if we do not engage and become politically literate, we'll be on this spot. Because when I was growing up, I saw pictures in Zimbabwe, shortage of milk, shortage of everything. Now it's happening in Kenya. What has happened in Zimbabwe? What has happened in Venezuela? What has happened in other countries?
Come on, we have not reached that level.
Right now,
wait.
Are you a farmer? If you go to the National Cereals and Produce Board today, you can only access 5 bags of fertilizer. The minister said you can take up to 20, but you can only take 5.
Yeah, see,
Is that not a crisis?
No. Shortage.
That's a shortage?
No,
Okay,
the
there we go.
crisis. Crisis when there's nothing.
Have you not heard about economic terrorists? Have you not heard about state capture in South Africa, where Zuma takes a decision not to serve the interest of South Africans, but to serve the so-called Guptas?
And where's Zuma right
So
now?
let me ask you. So what we are seeing happening, let's say the example that you've just given, fertilizer, all right? So there's a fertilizer subsidy being extended by the government. And this one is where now there's a whole issue of prices. The market dictates that the price is 7,000 shillings. The government is going to put the difference so that you only pay, say, 2,000 or 3,000. I'm not sure the figures, okay? But in order for us to be able to serve everybody and the limited resources that the government has, get up to 20 bags of fertilizer.
And you're a commercial farmer.
And you're a commercial farmer. Notwithstanding. Go to the store, get only 20 bags of fertilizer.
But
Now,
you're only given 5.
what else is causing you to actually only access 5? The global supply. And we've seen that. I mean, the global supply for fertilizer has been impacted hugely by, again, just like Biden will tell us, blame it on Putin.
You've opened another Pandora's box. Do we have a crisis in fertilizer availability in Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, or Egypt, or Israel? Why is it limited to Kenya? And these are very pertinent questions. How come Uganda attained food security and not they have a surplus? How come Tanzania attained food security and they have a surplus? There's a very high probability that the onions you're consuming in your house and tomatoes are from Tanzania.
See the onions. Yes, and see we can buy them.
So what is the reason? What is the reason behind that?
The reason is, and because now my DNA is politics,
Yes.
It's about leadership. We've heard about status quo leaders. We've heard about this thing called Itweka moment. And I think the voter now must become very selfish. Unfortunately, the Kenyan voter is emotional, irrational, and they don't see their ballots having a connection with the bank balance.
Dismas is not true. The Kenyan voter is a very well-informed voter.
So they're not emotional and irrational.
No. He's characterizing them as though that is the sum total of what they are. They may express emotion from time to time. They may become irrational like everybody else on the planet, but that's not them. They are polite, nice people who have given their leaders a lot of leeway that the leaders keep abusing.
Are you talking about the Stockholm syndrome?
No.
That we are falling in love with our captors?
No. Stockholm syndrome simplifies this situation that we have in this country. Kenyans look at a problem, instead of they can see it, they know it, they'll find a way around it. It's what they do. They always try to find. Now, if that is a bad trait, then it's a bad trait that helps keep this country stable because they don't pitch a fit. Now, how do you get Kenyans to be able to voice what they genuinely feel? Because we tend to be fairly passive-aggressive. Why don't you take leaders to task and ensure they do what they're supposed to do? Kenyans would rather take their energies to finding a solution to help them instead of taking their energies to challenge their leaders.
Why? Is it because they're not connecting their problems to that leader?
They connect. And if you look at our at our processes, our democratic process, we know there's an election in 5 years.
Yeah.
When we get to understand that we can actually remove you before 5 years and we can actually do it and see it done, as we've seen with the impeachments.
Why wait for removal? Why not make you do your
You know
work?
what I'm referring to here? The process by which people absorb, accommodate, and understand what they have before them.
Something happened during the UDA party primaries. A gentleman called Mutai was campaigning, and people started making contributions.
You're talking about Eric Mutai?
No, I think running for
Eric
people
Mutai.
started giving him resources, and I think those are the eureka moments. Those are the eureka moments we did in Kenya when we realize that a leader who does not represent your selfish interest does not deserve a position of leadership. So, in my view, when we go to vote, we must have a clear matrix of the reason why we are voting. Do not vote for somebody simply because he comes from your village or you've got same ancestors and believe that it's going to work.
You have to start there. They have to come from my village. Otherwise, why am I going to vote for them?
And
I also come from that
that's
village.
not the only reason. Basically, that should not be the rationale. But
I said it starts from there.
because you come from my village, therefore I'm going to elect you as president.
Eric, usually when you come from my village, I know you better than I know the other people.
Senator Abbas, you know you just,
Okay, the
you
new
what Dismas
manage
is
your
saying.
oil crisis.
But you're just spoiling for a fight.
Oh, yes, I am.
Let me stop you then at that point. Let's talk about water and Colgate. Dismas, thank you very much for joining us.
So 1 hour is over?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It gets over
Can you imagine you
in 20
survived
minutes.
what the big boys have also done?
I'm very proud of myself.